Job's done. Hello fellow nerds and welcome back to another video. I have been getting pretty fed up with the class design in Legion. I don't know what the hell the devs are thinking. I have written down a whole lot of things that I myself find pretty repulsive with the class design, and I have read a crap ton of things on the forums, and it seems that I'm not alone in thinking these things. I feel pretty comforting knowing that a lot of people feel the same way that I do about the class design. But this video is mainly going to be talking about the X factor that is missing with the class design and all the classes in Legion. So what do I mean by X factor? Some people might not really understand what that means, and I actually wrote down some examples for every single class, maybe aside from like DKs and what's the other one that I didn't write one down for? Warlocks, because that one's a little interesting. But I wrote down examples for every single class, and you're going to hear some pretty awesome stories, so get ready. So what does X Factor mean exactly? What that means is it could range from a number of things. Some classes, sometimes I remember actually being able to prevent a wipe myself, and really just comes down to a player who actually knows how to play their class to the point where you can actually make your group better. And currently in Legion, any group I've ever been in any raid myself, if a tank dies or if a healer dies, things just kind of start going to crap, slowly, and then you end up wiping. There's not really a whole lot that you can do to prevent it. But what an X factor really means is, I'm just going to use a quick example on my warrior back in HFC in the worst expansion ever, Warlords of Draenor. I was on Manaroth, and if you don't understand how the tanking kind of works with that, two tanks are supposed to be stood up against a pillar, and if one of the tank gets knocked off the platform, it can pretty much be a wipe just because of the debuff that Manaroth puts on the tank. But I actually have video of this, and I was lucky enough to be recording when this happened. On my warrior, sure enough, our off tank got knocked off the edge because he kind of sucked. And the raid leader was in a pug. The raid leader pretty much called for a wipe, and I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. I'll just off-tank it, and it'll be fine, and we'll kill the boss. And sure enough, I off-tanked it. The last, I don't remember the exact percentage. It was like 30% or so, maybe even 50. That right there is an X factor. I, myself, had the ability to understand my character and my abilities that I had in my arsenal to help prevent a wipe. So that right there is an example of an X factor. The basic understanding that I want people to get out of this video is that Legion, the class design, is just way too simple, and I really love the expansion. I love all the content. I love all the things we have to do, but I've noticed that I've had a hard time finding an excuse to log in, and I've never had to really say that before other than a good portion of WoD. It just feels way too simple, way too easy, just not a whole lot of choices are given to us, and that's really what I want to be taken out of this video. I want you guys to understand that class design used to be kind of difficult, and if you're a really good player, you stood out amongst other players, and you were recognized on your server. Just all sorts of really awesome stories could be told. There's so many things to mention, but I'm just gonna get into the examples of all the classes. So here you go. My very first example is Druid. I remember a time back in Siege of Orgrimmar on a very specific boss named Galacras, and Well, you really could use it in any other situation, but it came in really, really big handy. Really big handy. Really? I just said really big handy. It was really useful in Galcras because, well, if a healer died, then you had another healer that got fixated with the ball of fire and had to run away. At least if you're in a 10-man situation, you don't really have a healer that can use a healing CD at that point unless you have a shaman you can drop healing tide. But I just remember a lot of situations on my druid, whether I was tanking or DPSing, where I could use Tranquility. Tranquility saved so many fights, so many wipes, especially on Galacras. It was insane, and one thing that became a very memorable moment for me was calling Tranquility as I was tanking just bear trank. And my raid leader called out bear trank, and it just became a thing. And every single time that I heard that bear trank, I was just like, I got all giddy. I was like, oh my god, this is exciting. I mean something to this raid right now, and if I press this ability and we don't wipe, it's like, oh my god, all the lights are shining on me. I'm amazing. I'm awesome. That's the X factor for Druid. This next one gets a little bit tricky because it has to do with mages and kiting. So you can still kind of kite a little bit, especially as fire, just not as well as you used to be able to back in the day. There are a couple examples I will use for mage kiting, and there's not only kiting that I would mention. So there was a moment when I was doing, I can't remember if it was progression or if it was just another kill on shamans in Siege of Orgrimmar, but in Heroic you had to split up the bosses. You pretty much had to split up the bosses. And on my side, our tank died. And being a fire mage, as I was, I got the next, I was the next person on the aggro table. And instead of just freaking out and ice blocking, what I did was I popped my mirror images, I blinked, and I blazing sped over to the next tank, so the tank did not have to come over because he was having to drop the tombs. And if you know what I mean by the tombs, it's like a wall, and if you mess up the placement on that, it can be a huge pain in the ass, and melee DPS can take damage from it and pretty much die. So instead of just being a little bitch and ice blocking, I brought the boss to the other tank so he could taunt while another person got the breads for that tank. And that fight we killed because I was able to do those things. And now it's just absolutely not even possible. It's really ridiculous. On to my next example. It will be hunters. And the example I want to use is Deterrence. So I'm using a lot of Siege of Orgrimmar examples. I'm starting to realize it's kind of funny. So on Kor'kron Juggernaut, when like you were doing heroic or normal, this is when I say heroic or normal, this is like when it was current. When you were doing heroic and you had to have somebody soak a bomb or soak anything, solo soak anything, hunters had Deterrence, and you also had a glyph that decreased the amount of damage that you took while in Deterrence. So that helped a whole lot, and also you can still kind of kite a little bit. I guess I won't mention any of that, but Deterrence. And when I don't want to bash it, I don't, but we don't have Deterrence, and it's killing me because that's just one other thing I have to bitch about hunters. So let's just get off of that before I start doing a whole different type of video. Okay, so as you heard at the beginning of the video, I mentioned an example for warrior off-tanking, as I like to call it. We used to have an ability called defensive stance, and we still do have taunt, but defensive stance, you took less damage, and your threat generation was as if you were a tank, if not a little bit higher. And off-tanking on a warrior, if you used your die by the sword, if you knew how to kind of go through that rotation and help prevent a wipe, you were a god. You were amazing. And there are seriously numerous situations where this has happened to me on my warrior, and also having banners like crit banner and the banner where he took less damage and all that kind of crap. I'm not asking for banners back, although it'd be kind of nice. But yeah, that's my that's my warrior example. My next example is not really anything class specific, but it's more tank specific. And yet again, I'm using a Siege of Orgrimmar example on Garrosh. I was able to tank Garrosh solo tank on every single class, although Paladin I noticed was the hardest to do. And I solo tanked Garrosh at an eye level that wasn't even equivalent to the level in which I killed him on when I was solo tanking. And yeah, I can still kind of solo tank a little bit sometimes with some classes, but it just wasn't nearly as good, nor did it really feel as good as it has in the past. Yay, I finally get to do an example that has nothing to do with Siege of Orgrimmar, but it has to do with the same expansion. On my Shaman, I was in a pug in normal when it was current, and we were on Iron Khan in Throne of Thunder, and we were at the very last phase where he starts doing the smash thing on the ground, and you gotta start using healing CDs. Well, we had a healer dead, and we only had one healer. We were doing 10 men, so 2 healers, whatever. And on my Shaman, I had Healing Rain, I had Healing Tide, I had Healing Stream Totem, and while I was also able to do DPS, I was doing a little bit of like half DPS and half healing. And guess what? We killed the boss because I was able to help out with a little bit of healing so we could get through the hard damage phase. There's another example I want to use with my Shaman that would probably take me about 5 minutes to explain, so I'll just keep it simple, at least for Shaman, for now. Next example is priests. It's more specifically Shadow Priest, but Vampiric Embrace and Hymn of Hope. Hymn of Hope gave mana back to healers if the healer didn't know how to control their mana, like an old GM of mine. I'm not going to mention his name, but he had mana problems, and our Shadow Priest in our group was able to help give him mana back with Hymn of Hope. And Vampiric Embrace acted as if it was just another healing CD, and it was extremely useful, not only in raids, but also in PvP, in arenas and BGs. So, yeah, there's that. And on to my last example. I know I'm not going to be mentioning all the classes, but yeah, some of them didn't really get a whole lot changed for them. But if you did notice something about DK or a Warlock or a Monk that I didn't mention in this video, please leave it in the comments. That would be awesome. So my last example is Paladins and Devotion Aura. Back in Siege of Orgrimmar, Devotion Aura, you could use that when the little Wheels of Death were coming out, and guess what? Damage reduction. Oh my god, it was amazing. And a big reason why I mentioned this is because I have a friend who has mained a Paladin for many, many years, and I just remember any single time I did Siege of Orgrimmar, I looked for him. I looked for my buddy who played a Paladin, because we really wanted that. We really wanted Devotion Aura. We really wanted a lot of the things that Paladin brought to the table in raiding. And now I kind of just look at a Paladin and be like, oh, that's a Rip Pele. Oh, that's a tank. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Okay. It's just I just don't feel it anymore. It's really frustrating that I have to make this type of video, because WoW to me has always had an X factor for every single class for as long as I've been playing the game. So, yeah. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys are enjoying Legion, because I kind of haven't, but yeah, y'all have a great day.